Half a day, everyone, and welcome to D16 tonight. We have 3 of your candidates with us in studio, ready to take your questions. All you have to do is go to our Facebook page and interact with us on our live stream. For those of you who are already online, fire away. We'll get to your questions in a bit. With us this week are Democrat senatorial candidates, incumbents Judi Won Pat and Vice Speaker B.J. Cruz, as well as Republican incumbent Tommy Morrison. Before we begin, I'll give you each about 30 seconds just to introduce yourself to our viewers online and on TV. We'll start with you, Tommy.
Hey, half a day, and thank you, KUM, for this invitation to participate in this segment. A few years ago, I made it very clear that this government needed to invest heavily in e-government initiatives. And with the help of my colleagues, we were able to establish the Office of Technology, and now we are developing roadmaps going forward to better address our cybersecurity issues, our GIS programs, policy and planning, web development, and the list goes on. I've also worked very hard to secure needed resources for our youth and our families at the village level with investments with improved sports and community facilities. So I look forward to continuing this effort, and I look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Okay, Speaker Won Pat.
Half a day, I am Judi Won Pat, and I'm from the village of Inarahan. I'm a single mom, and my 3 children are Atoy, Melvin, and Anna Maria. And I have 4 grandchildren. I love, of course, our island, and I'm running because I come from a family who have dedicated their lives to giving back to our island. And I also have done, my life work has been primarily that of making our lives and our children's life and our grandchildren's life better for Guam. Better, rather, for Guam. That's true. See how
It's all right. Vice Speaker.
Sabrina, please allow me to use this time to thank the people of Guam. They've allowed me to work as their servant for many decades, and whether it was as a judge or the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and now as a senator. And so every day I try to devote myself to living up to that trust that they give me, and I'm hoping that I have proven that I can be trusted with the service that they've allowed me to have, and will allow me to return for another term.
All right, well, thank you again for joining us. We're going to go through the questions that are being posed from our viewers on our Facebook stream, and you'll have 30 seconds to respond to each question. We'll begin with a question from Mr. Art Murphy, and this question is directed towards Vice Speaker Cruz and Speaker Won Pat. You both have long runs with seats. I wanted to know what strides have both of you made with our tax code. Are you for or against it, or is it not on your agenda? So we'll start with you, Speaker Won Pat.
Well, I know that's a very complicated issue, and I know that at one time, former Speaker Ben had wanted to get the commission together to address the tax code. Nothing, of course, has been done about it. I know Senator Nicholas had asked also whether individuals have been appointed, and he's decided that he wants to take that issue up. Normally, we would leave it to the chairperson of that who has oversight over taxes, and definitely Senator Nicholas does. And depending on what they would come up with, then we would like to discuss what those are before we decide whether we're going to adopt it or continue as is.
Vice Speaker.
As she had mentioned, Senator Nicholas has convened the commission. We've had a couple of meetings, and we've had some very interesting information given to us from the Congressional Research Service and from the Office of Counsel at the IRS, and it has shown that some of the things that we were concerned about. I've been following this for a couple of decades also, and at first I thought that it was the thought that we wouldn't be able to use the QCs on Guam, and then there was an issue of whether or not it would affect the triple tax exemption of our bonds. But I'm on the commission, and I'm willing to work to see how we can improve things.
This other question comes from Darlene and Timothy Cruz, and this has actually been something that a lot of people have been talking about. Where do all three of you stand on Guahan's political status? And please explain. And I'll give you each about 1 minute to explain your answer, and we'll start with you, Vice Speaker.
Well, it's been no secret for the last 40 years I've been at the forefront of activism in Guam and been proposing that we move to independence. I also understand that as a history major, that the United States isn't going to allow us to have the kind of independence that we want. We will always have to realize that a lot of the moves that we want to make on our island are going to be affected by geopolitical concerns. But that doesn't mean that we can't at least exercise the right to express to the United States what it is that we want. That right of self-determination, I think, is a human right that can and should be expressed. And even just for the significance of it, I would be supportive of the independence movement, so that we would have the ability to be able to do the kinds of things that we want to do, with an understanding that geopolitical concerns would also affect our ability to be able to do a lot of the things that we might want to.
Senator Morrison?
I've always made it very clear that I'm all for a closer relationship with the United States. That's very important. I have not defined a position for any status, but I also believe that these three statuses have the opportunity to still establish a much closer relationship with the United States, depending on the framework. I thank the organizations of all the status groups for their efforts that they're making and striving to ensure that our people are well educated and informed of all the positions that statements that they're putting out there. So there's a lot more time available to digest what these organizations are putting out before us. So it's very important that our people get educated on this information.
Speaker Won Pat?
You know, it's funny because I've actually gone through a process of educating myself. And when I was very young, you know, and I had moved to Washington, D.C., and I knew where my father's position was, and my father, you know, was for statehood. Mm-hmm. And, you know, growing up, of course, I heard that. I was influenced by him. Then I started to do a study of my own in college, and I wanted to find out what was going on with the relationship between Guam and CNMI, and that kind of shifted again my thinking. When I came back to Guam, there was this constitutional convention that took place, which I became a part of, still thinking the same thing, more statehood, having our own constitution. But when I first ran, and this was a topic, then that's when I started to really learn more about it, and I had shifted to free association, thinking that might be a better option for us by having close ties to the United States, but also being able to work with our neighbors, because I used to be, or I'm a member of the Association of Pacific Island Legislatures. But today, I have to honestly say that I'm now favoring independence.
Okay, our next question, it comes from Rick St. Nicholas. He asks, the government is broke. Please explain why you or any government elected or appointed official deserves a raise. And we'll start with you, Senator Morrison.
Well, I want to make it very clear that there hasn't been really any divide within our legislature. If you look at the Budget Act of 2016 and 2017, both of those measures clearly, with the numbers that are in there, are attached to staffing patterns. Those staffing patterns also reflect numbers that reflect the Competitive Wage Act. Mm-hmm. Practically all of us voted for both measures. I want to make it very clear that those measures give the perception of a repeal, and also designed to fail. Obviously, the measure keeps failing, but I'll make it very clear that if a measure becomes before the legislature to end the gamesmanship, the political gamesmanship, I will vote for a measure that will roll back senator salaries, again, specific to senators.
Vice Speaker Cruz.
When the special session was called a couple of years ago now, right after the election, I was not opposed to the raises going to all the rest of the elected officials. I thought that they can and should be receiving an increased salary. At that point, I did not believe that we as a legislature could increase our own salary.
Right.
My reading of the Organic Act was that we couldn't. I was surprised afterwards that my reading was way too conservative. A reading of the Organic Act that we couldn't give ourselves a raise. I guess I'm stopping.
I mean, your time's up. Speaker Won Pat.
But the question is whether senators deserve the raise. I think for any position, I think an individual who works very hard, no matter what, deserves a raise. But barring that, of course, then the next question then we have to ask ourselves is whether we're able to sustain that raise, whether we're able to continue with all the services that we need to provide for the government. And it's obvious that now we can't. Initially, when the governor said yes, we rely on the governor's financial people to tell us. And then we're finding that Vice Speaker is seeing that the monies are just not coming in. So therefore, the position that I take is that, yes, we should roll back the senators' salaries. And senators is $400,000. All of the elected officials, really, and appointed are $2.1 million. So do the numbers, and see where it can make a difference.
We're going to take more of your questions after the break. Stay tuned. D16 Tonight continues after this.